and welcome to today's software success. As always, I'm excited to be here talking about software, and today's a very unique one, and I'll tell you about it in just a bit. But while we're waiting to talk about the program for today, let's see who we have in the house watching software success. So if you're over there in the chat, shout out, say hi, say where you're watching from, and we'll just give a little bit of time for people to jump in. So let's say hi to everybody. So good to see all of you. Already recognize some names here. So thank you for joining. So Dawn's from O'Fallon, Missouri. So thanks for being here, Dawn. And Elaine from Pennsylvania. She said she has Pep, Cut and Stitch, My Block Piecer, and My Quilt Embellisher. So Elaine, we're talking about a different program today, but some of the things that I'm going to show, it'll still be things that'll help you even with yours. So I'm just showing specific features in one of them. So thanks for joining as always. Laura, glad you're having some sunny weather in Nebraska. So that's kind of nice. And Michelle from Pennsylvania, thanks for joining. Beetlebug, oh, that's so cute. Thanks for being here, Beetlebug. I love that. So that's just happy and fun to say. Thanks for joining, Dawn from Republic, Washington. Good to have you here. Connie, thanks for being here from Florida. I'm in Florida too, Connie. Mary Larson, always good to see you from Santa Fe, beautiful Santa Fe. And we also have Connie from Springs in Idaho. Welcome to Spring in Idaho. So thanks for being here, Connie. Good to see you too. So Joanne Banco, thanks for being here, Joanne. Always nice to see you from Northeast Idaho or Ohio. Sorry. Thanks for being here as well. So got lots of people joining in. Glad to have all you guys here. And then Dawn, thanks for being here, Dawn. Dawn is Creative Appliques. You guys know Dawn as well. So glad to have everybody here. Lots of people joining in, piping in. So good to see you. So today we are going to be talking about our vintage embroidery software. Now, as you guys know, software success, we always are talking about software. We're trying to learn our software, or we're trying to, get to where it's comfortable for us and that we can do pretty much anything we want to. So we answer lots of questions here, and it's all related to software. Well, today, because this is a very unique type of embroidery, I also have other information about needle and thread that we recommend and other tips that we're going to be used. So today will be definitely software, but I do have some other information about using a chunkier thread in your embroidery. And that's what this particular software was actually designed for. So it's called our Vintage Embroidery Software Program. And of course, just like all of our others, it is a standalone program. You can install it on your computer and use it to manipulate your embroidery designs, save them to your format. Now, this particular program, Vintage Embroidery, this was actually inspired by ready-to-wear items that have like a vintage style embroidery on it using like a really chunky thread. So if you've ever seen things like from Johnny Was, that's something that you see a lot that has that kind of bold embroidery, and you can look at it and you can tell that it's not our normal 40 weight embroidery thread. So that's what this software, Vintage Embroidery, was designed to mimic, was that style of stitching. It's very unique. I'm unfamiliar with any other program that does this type of stitching from other companies. And so I do think this is very unique to us here at Dime. And I do have some images that I'm going to show you, and it's also on my shirt. So in just a bit, whenever we go to our Q&A, you'll see my shirt. But this type of stitching that we're talking about today, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background. It is embroidery. It is machine embroidery, but we're using a thicker embroidery thread. And so the design itself has to accommodate that thread. You cannot just take an embroidery design that you already own and just start embroidering with a thicker thread, because when a digitizer creates a design, they digitize for a specific weight of thread. And generally, if it's outside of your normal 40 weight embroidery thread, then they let you know. But look at these stitches. You can really kind of see how bold they are as I zoom in here. And look at that zigzag stitch there down the center, how it's not like our satin stitches. It's not really tight and smooth like our satin stitches. This is going to more look like I said, a vintage style of embroidery, maybe even a hand embroidery. Look at the run stitches that actually form the shape of the boards, of the surfboards there, how bold those run stitches look. You know, a lot of times on camera, it just looks like one single line of thread, but you really can tell how bold that is because that thread is thicker than our embroidery thread. And look how bold it is there. So isn't that cool? So that is the type of stitching that we're talking about today, is this vintage inspired stitching style that you can create with our vintage software. Now, I'm going to kind of really throw something to you in this example here. Now, originally when this program came out, we had two weights of thread. We had a 40 weight, which is the same weight as your regular embroidery thread. And then we had a 15 weight, which was a thicker type of thread. And you can see in those stitches in this picture, I thought it was a really good example. The green part of that border is a 15 weight thread, and the blue part is actually a 40 weight, which is the same weight as your embroidery thread. So some of these designs do combine the two different weights to give you this unique style. And so we need to know which weight to put in our machine whenever we are embroidering the design. And I'm going to share with that. And what I'm going to talk about with that actually does work in all of our programs. And we're going to talk about understanding your sequence view a little bit. So, and that'll help in this instance. But just to give you an example, so take a look at this picture here. So these two threads, I just wanted to share with you the different weights. So thread comes in a variety of different weights. I'm sure that you've seen it. You've heard us talk about specifically 40 weight and also 60 weight. We talk about those two weights regularly of embroidery thread. But the higher the number, the thinner the thread. So look at those two examples. On the left is a 12 weight thread, and then on the right is a 40 weight thread. So what I'm going to be talking about is going to combine a 40 weight and a chunkier 12 weight, and you could also use a 15 weight. That's just a thread weight that's a little harder to find. So that's what we're going to be talking about with our machine embroidery vintage software today. So let me head over and I'm going to get started with that, and then we will certainly answer any questions as we go. I'm going to be using Dime's vintage embroidery software program, and so I'm going to head over and let's get started with what we're going to see in this program. So this is our Dime Vintage Embroidery software program. And the major part of this program is about creating those designs that will accommodate the 15 weight embroidery thread. And we also have tons, thousands, in fact, of built-in embroidery designs. So if I click on this first icon, you guys know in most all of our embroidery software, this first icon on the second row here will bring up some sort of library of designs that most likely relates to your particular program that you're in. So like whenever I saw that Elaine had my quilt embellisher, when you click that first icon, it brings up quilt blocks. So in any Dime software, the first icons on the second row are generally always something that's specific to the program that you're working with, or how you're going to manipulate your design. So in this case, it opens up a catalog of embroidery files. Now, as I scroll down through here, you can see that there's a very long list of designs in here that you can choose from. Now, I'm just going to flip through some just to kind of give you an idea. These designs are, again, vintage inspired designs. I'll come back to that one there. That will use a combination of 40 weight and also a thicker thread like a 12 or a 15 weight. I can't say that enough. And so you can see that we've got lots of different options here as I scroll down. And you can continue to scroll and see, have some really cute vintage scissors there. And then I'm going to work on this with this camera here because it does have two weights of thread, and I want to show you how to pick that out. So in this category here, we'll come back to this, but also here you can see that this color therapy design that I picked up, clicked on, these designs are all white. They are actually fill stitch designs that are designed for you to use fabric markers or fiber markers. And so you can select these designs and then decorate it by coloring in the different areas of the design. And I have some pictures I'll show you of that. So that's what you'll find in your catalog here. Now I'm going to go back to the objects and then scroll down to that camera. And we're going to select both of these designs. Notice that nearly every design in the catalog has two versions. There's one that has a D for a die line. I lost my camera. Hope nobody's getting seasick here. Watching me scroll, scroll, scroll. I wish I could hear you guys yelling out. There it is. There it is. And so here's the first camera. And then when I hover over the second one, it has a D after it. And that means that it's got a die line around it so that you can make like a frayed edge type design. So you would put that down and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to put both of them on the screen. So I'm going to first select one of them and click OK. And you can see that this design here has the camera and the line around it. But let me go and grab the other one. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And then I'm going to go back to my library, back to my objects. And this time I'm not going to scroll so fast. And there we go. And click OK. And now move that one over. Okay, so here you can see that I've got one that has this line around it and one that does not. And actually, I think that I said that backwards. If it has the D at the end, it's the design only. And if it does not have the D at the end, it has this extra line around it so that you can cut and fray that fabric. So, okay, so both of these designs really stitch out the same. Except for there are different weights of thread. So I want to show you how to pick that out. So now here's something that no matter which design dime software you have that I use regularly, when you open up any design, usually when you start a new page first and then open a design, it puts your default color palette down here in the very bottom where my cursor's blinking. These are my color chips. So it usually puts the default palette because I already had it open, and then it puts the colors in the design. So I'm going to push this minus option and it's going to take away every color that I'm not using. So now I've only got the black, yellow, and gray because those three colors are the three colors that make up these two designs. So now I'm going to go over here to my sequence view. Now that was not absolutely necessary. It's just something I wanted to show you how it worked. And I'm clicking on my sequence view, which are the three lines over here in the bottom right hand part of our properties area. And you can see that as I hover over, I can see what each of these objects are. Okay. Now, also in this description, which is very important, there's two ways to determine which weight of thread is recommended for these designs. So if I take a look at my list, it says for this first one, dime 15 weight rope. So that used to be our rope thread that we have. We no longer have the 15 weight thread. So I would recommend any brand that you would prefer to purchase. We have had really good success with Sulky's 12 weight cotton thread to replace our vintage 15 weight thread. And that's what I've used in some of my examples here. And so 15 means that it's the thicker thread. 40 weight is your normal embroidery thread. So in this instance right here, the yellow of the camera, and also there's a yellow outline to make our applique. So I get a placement and a tack down so that I've got this extra applique stitch under here to make that frayed edge. So that is also listing as a 40 weight thread. So let's watch this stitch out and I'll show you what I mean. So if we watch this, so that is our placement line for our fabric that we're going to leave and fray on our edges. And it is a 40 weight thread. And then as I come around, you can see those chunky stitches right there. Those are digitized for a 15 or a 12 weight thread. So your 12 weight thread there, and then the yellow starts again, and that is actually the 40 weight thread and the 15 weight thread again. And the same on this camera, it's just the gray and the yellow. Okay, so again, How do I know that? It tells me over here in my sequence view. Also, these color chips, if I hover over them, it will tell me in those chips. So when I hover over the black color chip here, if I read the description underneath, it says that that is dime 15 vintage rope, and then the yellow is the 40 weight, and then I've got 15 weight again. So where it says 15, you can use a chunkier thread. Now, wherever it says 40 weight, you can put your regular embroidery thread and you will have no issues whatsoever. Now, could you put your 40 weight where it says 15? Yes, because 15 weight thread is thick and you can replace it with the 40 weight if you prefer to. It's just going to not be as bold of a stitching, but it will work. What you do not want to do is where it says 40, like in the yellow, you do not want to use a thick thread where it is digitized for 40 weight. You will have a beast of a time, probably some broken thread, maybe even broken needles and birds nesting, because the design is not digitized for that thick thread. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So now let me go over here and take a look at the two differences we're talking about. So that was a built-in embroidery design that was already digitized for this specific type of thread. Now this design here, this is just a design that comes with your software. So if you want to, if you have vintage embroidery and you want to attempt to do this, you can certainly do so here. Over in your sequence view area, if I scroll up, and I'm on my designs tab here, so the one that looks like a little book. When you click on the designs category, there's actually 3 designs that automatically come in your software. Now I've added another one, so ignore the hello, but you will have this butterfly, these flowers, and this yellow flower here too. Okay, so take a look at the difference in the stitching. So these are our regular fill stitches, which are for a 15 weight thread, you can see is much more open because I need to accommodate a fatter thread than my regular embroidery stitches. But then look what happened to the satin stitches. So the green and the black outline are all satin stitches. And so it changed that to what we call a whipped stitch. This whipped stitch is digitized and your software is actually built in, and you can use that to create stitches for that vintage weight thread instead of your regular satin. It's got this very unique kind of random pattern to it. So it creates a really neat look. Now, I know that on the screen, this looks like a mess. And some people will look at this and say, oh gosh, you know, that's not really my style, which, hey, is perfectly acceptable. That's what we are. We're all individuals and we don't all like the same thing. But if you like this look or you want to incorporate it sometimes, the vintage embroidery software is what will do it. So let me show you how I actually converted this. It's really simple. So now I'm just using a built-in design, but you can actually do this with a design that you have from another designer, and it will convert it. So what it needs to do is convert the fill areas to the right density that will accommodate, and the right stitch length, not just density, that will accommodate those vintage stitches and the satins too. So I'm going to select this entire design. That is my regular embroidery design. And I'm going to right mouse click, and then I'm going to choose utility and change style. Now I'm going to leave this as normal. So this is just going to do regular underlay and things for me because it's actually based on these types of fabrics and things in here. So that's what the standard style is. So I'm just going to leave that as normal. And then for the special, when I click on this, you can see that it's actually already got my vintage 15 weight thread chosen. Okay. So when I go from standard, that list of normal embroidery stuff, and to special, then I've got the vintage already preset because that is my one special option here. And then I'm going to click OK, and it does all of that conversion for me. So now when we watch this stitch out, you can see that our yellow area is much more open, and it actually increases the stitch length. so that it will accommodate that thick thread. Okay, I cannot say this enough. You cannot take your regular embroidery design and just start using a 12 weight or 15 weight embroidery thread. Okay, so let me say that again. You cannot just take a regular embroidery design and just substitute a 12 or a 15 weight thread for a regular embroidery design that looks like this. Okay, if you do, you will have lots of issues. But by converting one of your regular designs to this vintage style stitching, then it will allow you to use that 15 or 12 weight thread in an embroidery design. So I just want to make that crystal clear because I don't want people to come see me in 2 weeks saying that I said you could use a 12 weight in all of your regular designs, because you cannot. You cannot. You might get away with your run stitch only designs, but if it's got a fill or satin area, you do not want to just throw in that 12 weight thread. So I cannot say that enough. In fact, if we were in a class, one thing I always used to do is have everyone repeat that with me. And so when you're at home by yourself, repeat that with me. You cannot just substitute the 12 weight thread for your embroidery design. You have to have a design that will accommodate that thicker thread. So, but now 40 weight thread is interchangeable no matter what, because generally your design is digitized for 40 weight unless otherwise mentioned. So, and then, hey, my friend Stephanie at So Stephanie Says, so she loves vintage, and I know that she uses her vintage embroidery software, and she's saying, what needle do I need for the 12 to 15 weight threads? So Stephanie, that's coming up, and I have an image of that, so we'll talk about that as well. And in fact, Laura asked the same question, what needle do you use for that? And you guys are definitely thinking in the right train of thought, because the thread is thicker, so we definitely want to use a different thread. And then Laurie, thanks for being here. Laurie, she says sewn upside down. Yes, no, we're sewing right side up with a heavy thread in the bobbin. You can do that. I've heard that called bobbin work, but what I'm talking about today, Laura, is putting this thread in your upper thread and your regular embroidery bobbin is what I'm talking about today. And a Facebook user says, if you have a regular 40 weight, can it be digitized in the software for the heavier weight thread? Yes, I think I started, probably you asked that question before I started talking about this. And the answer is yes. You can convert a design to use the thicker thread if it's meant for that 40 weight thread. So another really good question. And Terry, thanks for being here, Terry. Terry says, can you use two 40 weight threads in lieu of 15 weight thread? I specifically have never tested that. And so, but it's actually a really good point. So maybe that is definitely something that we could test and see. But I haven't tested it, so I don't want to tell you for sure, Terry, but really good question. I love that. So, okay. So now let's answer some of those questions and then we'll come back over here. So I'm going to go over to my PowerPoint here and show you about that needle. Okay, so now we just talked about this. So we talked about that thicker thread, the 12 weight or the 15 weight versus the 40. Okay, and we're going to see that in the design and know which area we can use it. Now, to use these threads, a 40 weight thread is your regular embroidery thread. So to use that in your machine or incorporate it into these designs, if it calls for a 40 weight, there's nothing different. You're going to do the same thing. Now, the tips for success that I have here, I should have put it at the top, is for the 12 and the 15 weight thread specifically. So if you have any of Dime's 15 weight embroidery thread, or if you do not have any and you are planning on using the vintage embroidery software, you can use a 12 weight thread. And I specifically use the 12 weight cotton from Sulky, and it worked great. So, and it's very similar weight from a 12 to a 15. I honestly didn't see a lot of difference in my embroidery, and it worked great. Okay, so for using a thick thread in these designs, you want to slow down the machine speed. You want to make sure your spool is upright, and then use a normal embroidery bobbin. So I use my embroidery bobbin, which is a 80 weight bobbin. So it's just my regular embroidery bobbin, and then 100 top stitch needle. Now, why the top stitch? Because the eye of that needle is so large. Now, I have used a 9014 embroidery needle before, and it did okay, but I definitely felt like it did much better with the 116. If you don't have the 116 top stitch, but you have a 9014, you certainly can give it a try. But let me tell you, I had much more success with the top stitch needle. Look at the eye of the needle. So on the right is my dime embroidery 90 by 14, 9014 needle. And then on the left is the top stitch 116 needle, and that is not an embroidery needle. It is a top stitch needle, and you can see how large the eye is, even though it is a bigger needle, but it is much larger than an embroidery needle eye. Also, the scarf on a top stitch needle is very specific as well, which works really well with these thicker threads. So 100 top stitch needle, and if you're using that thicker weight thread. Now, and I know somebody out there thinking, if I've got 40 weight and I have 15 or 12 weight in my design, do I have to switch out my needle? Well, the answer is, for best results, it probably is a good idea to do so, because this 116 needle is very large. But depending on the type of fabric, you probably could go ahead for it. If it's a woven, you'd probably be fine with the top stitch. I'd be leery of using like a thin knit with the top stitch. I wouldn't want it to, shred your knits. But switching out to your regular embroidery needle in those area of the 40 weight would be just fine. So, but give it a try. That's how we learn, right? Okay, so that is the needle, and the other recommendations for the thread in the machine. So now there are a few more questions have popped up, and then we'll head back over and see some other things. So does the tension have to be adjusted for the heavier thread? In my embroidery machine, I did not adjust the tension. I have heard of other people making some adjustments, but I just loaded it into my machine with my regular tension set. I did not make any adjustments for that 12 weight thread. So really good question. And then Chris says, can you select parts of the design to give the vintage look? You absolutely can, Chris. And when I go back over, I'll show you that specifically. That's as simple as ungrouping, which we can do in the vintage, but also in a lot of our dime software as well. And then my friend Eileen, hey, thanks for joining, Eileen. She said, does PEP have the converting capability? It does not. This particular stitch is only in our vintage embroidery software program because it's specific to this look. It's not in Perfect Embroidery Pro. However, if you would like to do some converting of your regular stitch, and when we go back over there, Eileen, I'll show you the difference. Your regular satin stitch, if you increase the length and also loosen up your density a bit, you could work with that and play with some thicker thread. But also this particular stitch that's irregular doesn't make like that traditional satin stitch. So there is a difference even if you adjust your density as well. So, and run stitch designs, I've had success if it's a longer run stitch length of say like a 4.0 or higher, then I can substitute my vintage 15 weight or that 40 weight thread as well. So really good questions there. So let's see what else we've got here before we head back over there. So we talked about the two color designs and are the changing the different parts. And then we also have, can you select parts of the design give it a look? Yes, exactly. So that same question. So then that's actually a perfect segue. Let's go back over to the software and see exactly how we can do that. So I'll bring that back up here, and then I'm going to undo and then go back to the regular design. Now, when you bring in an embroidery design, it might be grouped, and this is actually good education for any dime software. I'm going to go back over here to my sequence view again, and you can see in my sequence view, which gives me a lot of information about my design, it says that it's grouped, and that means that I cannot select the yellow or the green or the black. I can only select the whole design. So let's ungroup it. And when I ungroup, that allows me over here in my sequence view to see the different objects. So my yellow, I've got my the kind of purple center, the green, and then the black. So I'm just going to select nothing but the black and do a right mouse click utility, and then change style. Choose my special, because remember, normal is our normal embroidery, special, and it's already set to our vintage 15, and click OK. And you can see that it only did that on the black. Now I'm going to hide another really good lesson. I do this all the time over here in my sequence view. I love being able to just turn off these layers so I can see just one color sometimes, but I want us to watch this stitch out. So let's do our slow redraw. And I'm just going to do like one stitch at a time here. So it's tying the knot, but watch how this stitches. It's very irregular. It's not just making your regular satin stitch. So this was actually, again, digitized so that it looks a little bit more like our hand stitching. So it's irregular and it's not smooth and it's not so perfect like our satin stitches are. So that's what's going to give you that look. But like we said, if you take your regular satin stitch and you're going to play with your length and your density, then you certainly can try to do that and see if you can get that 12 weight to work. But you definitely want to increase it and also increase the stitch length as well. So now let's go back and let's look at some other things here. So I'm going to go back to my camera. And I'm just going to get rid of one of these, select it, and then I'm going to press the delete on my keyboard. Okay, another thing that we do all the time in our software. And then I'm going to select this, do a right mouse click on my toolbar. This is actually a feature that's in every software. I get this question quite often, but this center origin here will put this design at the 0 and the 0 on my screen. So right now you can see over here on my ruler bar, there's 0. And then here I'm around about the 3.5 for my center. But when I click center origin, I'm at 0, 0. Now your machine doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter because it's going to bring it up in the center anyway. But I do sometimes get that question of how do I get that just easily into the center of my screen? So, and that's an easy way to do it. Okay, so now let's add some text. So Vintage has built-in fonts. And if I click on my font option here and then click one time on my workspace, then I have some built-in fonts. Now over here in the list, I've got two regular embroidery fonts. So they have an F next to them and they are regular embroidery fonts. The others with the V as in Victor or vintage, those are all vintage embroidery fonts. So let me click on one of them and then you can see, if I make that bigger, you can see that it's that irregular style stitching again. But if I click over here on the actual window above my selection, it'll open up my catalog and I can see them in this manner. The first two, remember, were our regular, and then every one after that has the word vintage after it. So it's a vintage style embroidery font. So some of them are vintage satin style, like the one that you see on the screen. But we also have some vintage fill options, which make a really cute kind of a distressed letter. So if I make this larger so we can see it on the screen, and I'm going to, let's change the color. I changed it to the gray, but then I'm going to click on my gray color chip and then change it to, let's say this turquoise color will probably show up good on the screen. And now let's zoom in and take a look at that. So this is a vintage fill font. You can see that if you stitch this with your 40 weight thread, you're going to see all of those holes that you've got there. But the 15 or the 12 weight thread really covers and fills in this particular letter. But notice how it's got some holes here to look like that vintage style of stitching. So isn't that cool? I love this look. I know it's not for everybody, but it definitely, speaks to me. I just love the look of it. Okay. So the fonts work the same exact way that any of our embroidery fonts work. So I'm going to put, let's do, oh, snap, since we've got our camera there, and I'm going to click apply. And then I'm going to zoom out. Remember, if you double click your zoom tool, it will zoom to everything on the screen. So it'll zoom to fit. I'm going to move this up. And let's change that just for visual purposes right here on the screen to this satin look, but you can see how open it is for our vintage embroidery thread. Now, I just wanted to talk to you about just font editing, because this is something you can do in any dime software that has text built in. So there's two different ways to select. I've talked about this before, but I also feel that it's never too much to say again, because we use font so much. So notice here, if I have my regular select tool and I select my font, it has these normal shapes around my design where I can click and drag it larger. I can drag it taller. I can even use these option here. A notification came up and said, careful, your stitches are getting too long. So that's what that was all about. So I probably should make sure I don't have them too big. But then these little shapes here on the side can skew. And you can see, like, I can make it look like italics, and then I can also skew it this direction too. So all of these little shapes that are around will all do something different. So I'm going to undo and put it back to normal, undo and undo. And then let's talk about when I have my text tool selected. So now if I click on the F for my text, now notice that my selection box has changed. I have some different options. I've got the ability to select one individual letter, and then I can resize or rotate that one individual letter. Okay, so that is available when you've got your text tool selected. So there's two different ways to select your text. Okay. Also, it gives me the ability to do what we call on-screen kerning. Those double triangles there will let me change the space between letters or even between words. Okay. So I can space these out a little bit if I want. And the other shapes here, you can see that I can actually make my text shaped differently by clicking and dragging those different shapes here. I've got my rotate option and resize, larger, smaller. And then also now when I drag these corners, let me do a right mouse click and reset. So this is actually in every software that has text. So take a look right here. When I am in my text tool and I do a right mouse click, see my right mouse click menu, I've got the ability to do my normal, circle text, text on a path, vertical. I can change the envelopes, which is kind of what we just did, only you can choose from these presets. So if I click this pin it left, you can see what it does there. And then let's click on it again. So I'm going to right mouse click, and then I can also reset, which just puts it back to our normal type of text. Okay. So let's do that again on the text editing. So I'm going to do a right mouse click, and let's choose vertical to see what happens. So if I click vertical, you can see that it puts my text in a vertical fashion. Now, these are also available over here in the properties, and we've talked about this before, but I just wanted to show you that they are under your right mouse click menu. And I'm going to go back and do my normal again. And there we go. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So adding the text is also really easy, and you can manipulate that the same exact way that you manipulate your text in any dime embroidery software. So pretty cool, right? The other thing in here that I'll mention while I'm in here is this repair icon. So these three icons here are specific to my vintage software when I have it isolated or when I have it set as default. The repair stitches, let me open up a, oh, we could just use it here. So when I click on the Band-Aid, look at all of these little random stitches, which are just cute. So let's choose a design. So I'm going to go new page. Let's go back into our library, and I'm going to go to the animals, and let's do this bunny, maybe might be cute, and go to repair. And I could grab some of these stitches to just put on the bunny, and you can see that they actually have a cutout behind them so that I can do like cut a hole and then put the stitch over top, and it'll look like repair. So I can fray it. Isn't that cute? So I just love that. It reminds me of when my jeans were repaired when I was little. So we could make this little vintage bunny that has had some repairs done to him with those little stitches. So that's what that icon there is for. And again, if I'm wondering what type of thread is recommended for this particular type of stitch, what it's digitized for, I would select it, and then I would go over here to my sequence view, and I can see that this one that I have selected said it is digitized for a 40 weight thread. So I could just use my regular 40 weight embroidery thread to do those repair stitches there. So, and then you can see that my repair here is for a 15 weight thread. My bunny outline is for the 15 or the 12 weight thread. But then notice the eye and the little nose here. Those are regular embroidery stitches. So your regular embroidery thread. And you can recognize that almost by looking at it. Let's zoom in and look at the difference. So look at the difference in the eye, the nose, and the stitches that are around the edge. So you can really tell a difference by look. But in case you're nervous or you're not sure, you can look over here and it'll tell you exactly what thread is recommended. So isn't that cool? I love vintage. Like I said, it's not a style that's for everyone, but I do really enjoy it, and it makes a very unique look. So let's see if we have any other questions that we can answer. We talked about selecting the different parts. And so then Eileen said, is 12 pearl cotton. So the 12 pearl cotton, if I remember correctly, yes, I do think that it is a 12 weight. Just verify whatever type of thread that you're using, because I did have some thread in my stash as I was looking through different options. I did have some thread in my stash that was even a 6 weight, which is a really thick, chunky thread. So Eileen, just verify the weight. I have specifically myself tested 12 and 15 weight, but as you guys know, as the number gets larger, then the stitch or the thread is going to get thinner. So anything from a 12 weight and up is going to get skinnier all the time that you're increasing that number. So any of those I would think that you would have success with, because they are getting smaller. Anything larger than a 12, I think it's getting really chunky for the embroidery stitches, because there are some repeats, even if this vintage style stitching, that I would be a little nervous about. However, what I say, just test. I mean, like, just, you know, of course, be careful with your machine, but maybe make a design. So Eileen, if you're using your Perfect Embroidery Pro, maybe just do like a satin stitch that's pretty short, and then open up that density really wide, do that test, and then adjust, do that test, and then adjust. So I know that testing is not always the most fun part of our embroidery, but it is a necessity sometimes, for sure. So, and then Terry says, can you edit stitch points in vintage? I also own PEP. So because you own PEP, and if you own vintage also, then yes, you will be able to edit those stitch points. And in fact, I'll show you using those two together. That's actually a really good example. So let's see if we have any other questions before we do that, Terry. And then Donna, hey, thanks for joining, Donna. So she says, are you going to show some designs that are stitched out? I do have some. I don't normally show designs, but because this is so unique, I do have some, just a few, and I'll flip over under my camera and show those. So thank you for asking that. So, and then Michelle says, should you loosen the tension before you thread with a 12 or a 15 weight thread? My Luminaire and my Bernina both seem to be angry when I try to thread these higher weights. So Michelle, I think every embroidery machine, sewing machine, serger, they're like people. They have their own personality. So me particularly, my embroidery machines that I use, I have a multi-needle and a single needle that I've put this 15 and 12 weight on, and I have not had to adjust the tension. However, I have heard of others needing to adjust it based on their machine. So that's something that you definitely might need to work out with your particular machine, brand, and model. And honestly, I don't even think it's specific to brand or a model. I feel like every machine, it could be the same brand, same model, but they all have their own personalities. I really do think that. So, and then Kara says, is that a fabric patch behind the repair stitches? It is a recommended like cut area so that you can repair that area. So it's not at all a stitched area. So the only thing that's stitched on the repair is the stitches. So no like little applique behind it. So really good question though. You certainly could make that happen if you wanted to. What speed do you recommend? So I would say for the thicker thread, Laura, on my machine, again, I do think machines all are different. I usually do 600 or less with this thicker thread and have really good success. But you might need to go, lower than 600 on yours, but that's usually a speed that I stitch at is 600 stitches per minute or lower with a thicker thread. And that seems to work great on my particular machine. And Jenny says, when you take the design to your machine, does it tell you the size thread? So that's going to depend on your machine. And I don't think that even I'm trying to think back and think whenever I was looking, but I don't think it's going to say it because your machine has those thread brands already coded in them. And so the 15 weight and the 40 weight of the vintage thread is probably not going to be coded. And I'm trying to even imagine what my machine did. I think it just converted to colors. I don't think it knew sizes. So if you need to print a chart, I can show you how to do that so you can take it and have it next to your machine. So I'll show you that when we head back over there. So wow, awesome program. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. You're welcome, Marianne. Thank you for always joining. So Marianne always is here and has lots of dime software that I know she loves too. Okay, so let's talk about printing that the color chart, and then there's the other question too that hopefully it'll come to me here in just a minute, but I'll show you that whenever since we're back over in here. Okay, so now if you want to make sure that you do have a list of those colors, if you go up to print on your icon, and this is actually a good lesson for anybody that has any dime software, how to use the print preview feature. So print preview allows you to print an actual size of your design, but you can also change these settings. So if you click on the settings, you have all of these check boxes here. And if you want to take something to your machine that tells you 15 or 40 weight thread, it's the color analysis that you want to make sure that you have checked. You could uncheck all of these, the rest of them if you want. Don't uncheck stitches. You're probably going to want to see your design, but it doesn't have to be realistic. You don't necessarily need the header. The artwork, you don't necessarily need that if it doesn't have an artwork in it. And so just choose these that work best for you. And when you click OK, let's do that again. Print. Pull that over. And now you can see here that it took away my header because I unchecked those. But if I click the arrow, the next page here is the color sequence. And it does say in this color sequence, let me zoom in here, 15 and 40 so that you know which one to use in which area. So you can definitely print that if you need to use that. So on your design. So let's just see here the other question. So design stitched out. I'm going to show you that here in just a second. And then can you edit the stitch points in PEP was the other question. Okay, so right now I only am using the features in my vintage, but let me show you if you have multiple dime software, they all work together, okay? And so let me show you what I mean by that. So I've told you guys this before, that most often I actually leave my embroidery tool shed as the default program because it has more of my icons up top. But notice now that even though it's the vintage design on the screen, I can edit these points here by using my shape tool. Okay, so if you have Perfect Embroidery Pro, Terry asked about editing those points. Yes, anytime you own two dime programs together, then you can use them, all the features in one place. In fact, I'm going to open up a new page and let's talk about that. So if I go over here to the right hand side and click my vintage embroidery icon, it's going to give me the options that I have on my toolbar. So I don't even have to switch between between the programs. And this works for all Dime software. If you've got multiple pieces, you can do this. So I'm going to click on the vintage embroidery design. It allows me to select I just love the animals. Can you tell? This moose is pretty cute here. And so I select my design, say okay, and then it puts that on the screen for me. And then again, I can use any of my tools that I have in my other software in conjunction with this particular design. It's also true that if I'm in right now, I've got my embroidery tool shed as the default. So if I bring in that design that we worked with earlier, I do not have to leave my default program, and notice under right mouse click, notice now I have many more options because I have gone to using all my software together. And then under utility, the change style, I can choose vintage. So it still will do it. And I don't have to flip between the software. I can leave my main program, my embroidery tool shed, as the default, and then I can still use my features for my other software. So that's another really good question. So, okay, so now let me go under my camera here, and I'll show you some of these samples. So here's my little shirt that I stitched out with the camera. Isn't that cute? And then you can see that that is a vintage text. So let me do this. Bring that up. Let me see if I can zoom in here on this camera. That might be the easier. So we're going to zoom a lot. So there we go. So let's take a look at that, and let me see if I can make all that go away. We'll have to deal with that box up there, but I think that's better. But you can see that this is definitely not as smooth as our regular fill because it is using that vintage, and you can see how chunky that looks there. And let's see some other things here. So this is a patch that has that rough edge around it, again, with those stitches. Now, this particular one here, I actually use the 40 weight in the green and the red, but in the pink is the 15, or you could also use the 12 weight as well in that open area there. But you can see the combinations of the two. Here's another example here on my flag. That's all the thick 12 or 15 weight here in the red and the white. And then in the blue, it's got the 40 weight, like your regular embroidery weight. And then look at this is actually one of my favorite examples. This right here is so nostalgic for me. It reminds me of something that I would see like my grandmother hand stitch, right? And so this little holiday tree here has a combination of the weights as well. So the white is the 40 weight, the green and the yellow are actually that thicker weight. And look how long that stitch is on that one side of that. So when I talk about creating a longer length, that's what I mean, to accommodate that thicker thread. But if you're doing it in vintage, you don't have to remember any of that. But like my friend Eileen wants to try it with her Perfect Embroidery Pro to convert it, then that's something for her to remember there. So here, this is a combination. Again, this is the 15 or the 12 weight in the text and in the pumpkin. And then here for my wheat is a 40 weight thread. And you can definitely see how much tighter those stitches are. If I had put a 15 or a 12 weight there, that would have given me a lot of stitch issues. So again, something to think about there. And then here's one more. This is just a border I put on a little towel there, and just that is all 15 weight embroidery thread for those shells there. So isn't that cool? Awesome. And so here's my different spools. So this is one of my sulky blendables that I used. And I wanted to show you, so this is what we used to have. We no longer have this, but if you bought vintage embroidery thread from us when we did carry it, then I wanted to show you, this is why I felt like it would work. So this is a 15 weight and a 12 weight thread. So there's not a huge difference in those numbers. So let me see if I can pull this one to a little bit darker so you can see that a little bit better. There you go. So a 12 and a 15 weight thread. So it's not a lot of difference there in the size. So that's why we, figured that you could certainly do them. And we no longer have that 15 weight, but if you own some of it, you certainly can. But then I just have my regular embroidery thread here. So here, let me back up again. So I've got those two thicker ones, and then my regular embroidery thread, and you can definitely see how it's thinner. So 40 weight is your regular embroidery thread. And these are 12 and 15 that I have here. So really cool, right? What do you guys think? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, so now let me see what else I've got here. So just to reiterate those different weights, because I don't want this to get confusing. If you're using a 40 weight thread, you can use that 40 weight thread in all of your normal embroidery designs, normal embroidery settings, because that's what the majority of designs are digitized for. But just make sure that you pay attention to any digitizer's instructions if it is meant for another weight thread. But with our regular embroidery thread, which is 40 weight, we generally will use a 7511, an 8012, or a 9014 needle. And the same applies in those vintage embroidery designs that I was just showing you. Now, the 12 or the 15, when you are doing those 12 or 15 weight thread, make sure you're using a 9014 or a 116 top stitch needle. Me personally, I went with the larger 116, had really good success with that and no issues whatsoever. But I'm talking about designs that have been digitized specifically for those thicker threads. So just, I can't say this enough. We can't just automatically substitute the 15 weight for the 40 because it's too thick. So just remember that. So, and there's just a little close up of those chunky threads. That again is a combination. The light blue around the outside is the 40 weight, and then everything else is the 15 weight. So isn't that beautiful? And it shows so boldly on those stripes. Now the color color therapy category that was in there, those designs are just solid white thread, or you can put whatever color thread you want. Doesn't even have to be white. But notice there will be no color stops for you to be able to change it to a different color. The colored roses and that cute little heart that's made into a strawberry, that's actually fiber markers that you can use to color that. Now, do you specifically need the designs in our software to do this? No. If you have a design and you just stitch it all in white with a cotton thread using your fiber markers, you can color the design, and it's a really cool effect. So so that's what those designs that are in there are, and that's why they don't have any color to them. So just wanted to share that with you. So okay, so let's see. Before we do go, I will see if we have any other questions here, but I do want to remind you, oh, I'm going the wrong way, and then I'm going too fast the wrong way. So in a couple of weeks, I will see you on April the 2nd, and I'm going to be talking about our Perfect Stitch Viewer, which is our icon viewer, and it does allow me to do some things also in Embroidery Toolshed. So it's about, viewing your designs, and I've got some tips for you using it, and also I'll show you some other things that it will allow you to do if you own Perfect Stitch Viewer. So we'll be seeing that in a couple of weeks. But before we go to the last bit here, let me just double check and see if there are any last questions that we have. And so then Marianne said that if you use the 40 weight in place of the 15, do you need to change any settings? If you use a 40 weight in place of the 15, Marianne, you could do it without changing any settings. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a lot more open area in your stitches. If you are fine with that, you don't have to change anything. If you do adjust your density because you want to use the 40 weight thread, it'll give you a little bit more coverage if you change your density. So, but you do not have to whatsoever. So, and then Michelle says, do you know if the Wi-Fi transfer capability is available on the free Toolshed? It is not. So Michelle, the Wi-Fi transfer to a Brother or a Baby Lock embroidery machine is available on all of the pieces of software other than the free version. So any other piece that we have, even the Perfect Stitch Viewer, which is only $99, has that transfer. So you could add on one of those pieces just to get that wireless transfer. So come see me in 2 weeks and you'll see what Perfect Stitch Viewer is all about. That might be worth it to you. So, hey, Lisa, thanks for joining. I know she doesn't always get to because she's sometime teaching. She said Ashley has a wonderful way of breaking things down and giving lots of gold nuggets of information. Thank you, Lisa. That is so nice. So I'm glad that you're able to join me today. So in 2 weeks, again, I'll be talking about Perfect Stitch Viewer. It's an icon viewer program, but it does give you some other capabilities like that Wi-Fi that I just mentioned. Also, If you do want to take advantage of the, oh, here's my little image of what it does. So it can take a list of designs and then turn them into images because it just displays them as a little image in your file explorer. So that's what Perfect Stitch Viewer does. And if you want to take advantage of the vintage embroidery software program, I always urge you to check with your local dealer. That is first and foremost. We love supporting our local dealers. Not only that, but they most likely can give you a really good deal. So check with them first. If you do not have a dime dealer local, you certainly can purchase that from our website, and that's our price for today. And then before I go, so that I don't tell somebody incorrectly, I just want to double check here and make sure that I told you correctly. So next week or next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the Perfect Stitch Viewer. And yes, if I can tell because I have a way of determining what's in what. So yes, even in the Perfect Stitch Viewer, I have the ability to transfer my design wirelessly. So I just want to double check that. Didn't want to tell you guys incorrectly. So yeah. So then back to this. Make sure you take advantage of that special if you want, or check with your local dealer, which would be my first and foremost preference. So, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation today. I know it was very different. I love the vintage embroidery software. It is near and dear to my heart. Makes very unique embroidery. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any further questions, find us over on our Facebook group. Our education team is over there answering questions on a regular basis. It's called Dime Inspiration Software Users. Join that group and I can certainly answer any further questions for you. So until we have software success again, I'll say bye for now and thank you all for being here.